My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 68 years old, and this past Thanksgiving, my daughter-in-law stood up in front of my entire family and told me I wasn't really one of them. I didn't argue. I said 4 words, got my coat, and drove home. What she didn't know was that the house she'd just thrown me out of, in every way but legally, had my name on the deed. Before I tell you what happened, hit subscribe if this is your first time here, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from tonight. I read everyone. Now let me take you back to the beginning. I married Michael's mother, Diane, when Michael was 5 years old. His biological father had left before Michael could even walk, and by the time I came into the picture, Diane was raising that boy alone, working double shift at a hospital in Asheville just to keep the lights on. I never once thought of Michael as anything other than my son. I was there for every school play, every scraped knee, every terrible year of his teenage driving lessons. I walk him down the aisle, metaphorically speaking. His own father wasn't invited, and Michael asked me to be the one standing up front when he got married, 10 years ago now, to a woman named Vanessa. I liked Vanessa well enough in those early years. She was sharp, ambitious, good for Michael in a lot of ways. But somewhere along the way, I couldn't tell you the exact moment, something shifted in how she looked at me. Little comments here and there, introducing me to her own family as Michael's stepfather with a certain emphasis on the word step, like it needed clarifying, like it was a technicality worth pointing out every single time. Diane passed away 4 years ago. Cancer, same as it so often is. And I think, in some way I didn't fully understand until recently, Vanessa had started treating my place in this family as something that died along with her, like my connection to Michael had only ever run through his mother, and now that she was gone, I was just leftover. A guest who'd overstayed a welcome nobody remembered extending. Here's something I should explain, because it matters for what comes later. About 12 years ago, before Michael and Vanessa were even married, I bought a house here in Asheville, a beautiful 3-bedroom place off Merriman Avenue, close to good schools, the kind of house I always pictured Michael raising a family in someday. I told him, back then, that it would be his and his future wife's to live in, rent-free, for as long as they needed. I never charged him a dime of rent in 12 years, but I never transferred the deed either. Diane had advised me, gently, before she got sick, Walter, keep the house in your name for now. Not because you don't trust him, because life is long, and things happen, and it's easier to give something away than to take it back. I didn't fully understand her wisdom until this Thanksgiving. Every year, Thanksgiving was hosted at that house. My house, on paper, though I never once called it that out loud. This year, my 2 grandkids, Lily and Noah, were setting the table, and the whole extended family had come in from out of town. Vanessa's parents, her sister, a handful of cousins I mostly recognized from photographs. I brought my usual contribution, a sweet potato casserole Diane used to make, the same recipe every year since she passed, my small way of keeping her present at a table she should have still been sitting at. Dinner started fine. Then, about halfway through the meal, Vanessa's sister made some offhand comment about real family sticking together, something about a cousin's wedding drama that had nothing to do with me at all. But Vanessa, maybe emboldened by a couple glasses of wine, maybe just finally saying something she'd wanted to say for years, looked directly at me down the length of that table and said, loud enough that every single person heard it and the room went dead quiet. You know, Walter, I've always found it strange that you sit at the head of the table like you're actually part of this family. No offense, but you're not really family. There's no blood between you and Michael. This is supposed to be a family gathering. I want you to understand. I have sat through insult before in my life. I've had worse said to me by strangers, but hearing it from someone I'd welcomed into my home for a decade, at a table in a house I bought with my own hands so that her children could grow up somewhere safe, in front of my grandchildren, who I watched go very still and very confused, not understanding why Grandpa's face had gone the way it had, that landed somewhere different. Michael didn't say anything. Not right away. He looked at his plate, then at me, then back at his plate, and in that silence, I understood something clearly. He wasn't going to defend me at his own dinner table. Not because he didn't love me. I believe, even now, that he does, but because he'd learned, over 10 years of marriage, which battles with Vanessa were worth fighting, and apparently this wasn't going to be one of them. I set my napkin down very carefully. I looked at Vanessa, and I said 4 words. You're right. I'll go. I stood up, put my coat on in the front hallway of that house, the house I bought, the house I'd never once mentioned owning, the house I was now walking out of like a guest who'd overstayed his welcome in his own property, and I drove home in silence, my hand steady on the wheel in a way that surprised even me, given what I was feeling underneath. I didn't cry until I got to my own driveway, and by the time I walked through my front door, alone, in a house that felt too quiet the way it always did since Diane passed. I had already made a decision. I wasn't angry enough to act rashly. I was calm enough, in fact, to do something far more deliberate. I picked up my phone, and I called my attorney, a man named Gerald Simmons who would handle my affairs for almost 20 years, and I asked him to come by my office first thing in the morning. "Walter," Gerald said, when I laid it all out for him the next day, "you do understand what you're sitting on here, don't you? You never transferred that deed. Not once, in 12 years. Legally speaking, that house on Merriman Avenue belongs entirely to you." I sat with that for a long moment. I thought about Diane's voice, all those years ago, telling me to keep things as they were, just in case. I thought about my grandchildren, asleep right now in bedrooms I'd paid for, in a house I'd never once used as leverage, not until a Thanksgiving dinner where I'd been told, plainly, that blood was the only thing that counted. "Gerald," I finally said, "I think it's time we talked about what happens next." Gerald and I talked for almost 2 hours that morning in his office. He laid out my options plainly, the way a good lawyer does. No judgment, just facts. I could sell the house outright. I could formally evict Michael and Vanessa with proper legal notice, giving them time to find another place. Or I could simply do nothing, let the resentment simmer, and pretend Thanksgiving had never happened. None of those options felt right. Not fully. I wasn't looking to punish my grandchildren, who had nothing to do with any of this. I wasn't even entirely looking to punish Vanessa, if I'm honest, though I won't pretend some part of me wasn't tempted. What I wanted, more than anything, was for the truth to simply exist out loud, the way it should have years ago, for everyone at that table to understand exactly whose house they'd been sitting in when they decided blood was the only thing that made a family. I asked Gerald to draft a formal letter. Not an eviction notice, not yet, just a letter, informing Michael and Vanessa, in plain legal language, that the property of their address was solely owned by me, Walter Hayes, and had been since its purchase 12 years prior, and that going forward, given recent developments in our family relationship, I would be re-evaluating the informal rent-free arrangement that had been in place. Gerald mailed that letter on a Monday. It arrived at their house on Merriman Avenue on a Wednesday. Michael called me 40 minutes after it must have landed in their mailbox, his voice tight in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager caught in some lie about where he'd really been on a Friday night. "Dad, Walter, what is this? Why would you send something like this?" I noticed a stumble. "Dad," then Walter. I let it sit there a second before I answered. "I sent it because it's true, Michael. I've owned that house for 12 years. I never told you, because I never needed to. It was a gift, freely given, no strings. But 3 days ago, at my own Thanksgiving table, I was told I wasn't really family. So I think it's fair that everyone understands exactly what not really family has been providing for the last 12 years. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Vanessa didn't mean it like that. She'd had some wine. She was just." "Michael," I said, and I kept my voice even, the way I practiced on the drive home 3 nights before. "I've been at every birthday, every graduation, every hospital visit for you since you were 5 years old. I buried your mother. I've never once, in 38 years, made you feel like you weren't fully mine. I'm not calling because I want an apology from her, though I wouldn't turn one down. I'm calling because I need you to understand that a house isn't a small thing, and neither is what was said at that table." He came to see me 2 days later, alone, without Vanessa. He looked like he hadn't slept much. He sat in my kitchen, Diane's kitchen, still in every way that mattered to me, and he apologized, really apologized, for the silence at that table more than for anything Vanessa herself had said. I should have said something right then, he told me. "I've thought about nothing else for 3 days. You've been my dad since I was 5 years old. Blood never had anything to do with it. Not once. And I let her say that in front of everyone, and I didn't correct her. That's on me, not just her." I appreciated that. I told him so. But I also told him something else, something I'd been turning over since that Thanksgiving night, that I wasn't interested in continuing to be a silent, invisible presence in his family's life, providing a house, providing love, providing everything, and getting written out of the definition of family the moment it was convenient. If I was going to keep giving that house rent-free, if I was going to keep showing up the way I always had, I needed it to be because I was actually wanted there, not tolerated, not quietly endured until the next slip of the tongue. Vanessa never called me directly. Not that week, not the week after. What she did do, about 3 weeks later, was write me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, which surprised me more than almost anything else in this whole story. In it, she admitted she'd never fully forgiven the fact that Diane wasn't around to referee the family dynamics the way she used to, that some old resentment about never fully being allowed close to Michael's side of the family had come out sideways, aimed at the wrong person, in the worst possible way. She apologized. I believed her, mostly. People rarely say ugly things at a dinner table for no reason at all. Usually there's some older wound underneath it, even if it doesn't excuse how it comes out. I didn't evict them. I want to be honest about that, because I know some of you watching might have wanted a harder ending, and I understand why. But I did make one change, and I think it was the right one. I had Gerald draw up new paperwork. This time, transferring partial ownership of the house into a trust, with clear terms that name Michael, specifically, as the beneficiary, along with Lily and Noah after him. Vanessa's name isn't on it. Not out of spite, but because I decided, at 68 years old, that the things I built in this life were going to go to the people whose place in my family was never, not for 1 second, up for debate. I still see my grandchildren every week. Michael and I are closer now, in some strange way, than we were before all this happened. Like something honest finally got said out loud that had needed saying for years. Vanessa and I are polite, careful, rebuilding, slowly, something that might never look exactly like what it was before, but might, in time, become something real instead of something merely convenient. I think about Diane a lot through all of this, about her telling me, all those years ago, to keep things in my name, just in case. I don't think she knew exactly what just in case would look like. I don't think either of us did. But I'm glad, now, that I listened to her. Not because I ever wanted power over my son's family, but because sometimes the quietest decisions you make, the ones nobody even knows about for years, turn out to be the ones that protect the people you love most long after you're gone yourself. If this story hit home for you, hit that like button, subscribe to Dad Law's Story if you haven't already, and see you in the next story.